together for you that the book has talked about, and give you some ways of using constraints theory to help you do a better job at creating physical activity environments that are beneficial for your students. All right? They introduce a slightly tweaked version of our triangle and start to talk about a hexagonal approach to the triangle. Well, when I'm gone, you're going to be doing some work that will help you look at that, but please don't be concerned that I'm suddenly going to introduce a hexagonal approach into the final exam, all right? Because my goal is that you have a good understanding of the triangle, and so that's where I'm focused the most, all right? But the work that you'll do while I'm gone that will get you looking at this hexagonal approach, the lab activity, it will just enhance your understanding of the triangle and how to use the triangle, all right? But there's not going to suddenly be a question that says fill in the hexagon. That's not going to be happening, all right? So I'm going to skip over the initial part of that chapter because you're going to be working on that while I'm gone. And I'm going to start with a little bit more about structuring the learning environment and the learning task, and then they introduce a task analysis that I want to go through with you on the board because it seems to me to be a really useful tool for you as teachers. So some of the people you work with are going to be highly competitive and want to be real athletes and training hard and are very self-motivated. What you find when you work with athletes, even though your coaches maybe complain that you're not motivated enough and that they're tired of having to kick you up the butt, trust me, compared to the regular population, any athlete who's competing is highly motivated to learn new skills and to train and to play, all right? So even though sometimes it seems like they're a bit flat, they really, compared to the PE people or the health population that you might work with, you don't have any trouble motivating athletes generally, all right? But not everybody wants to be elite, right? Some people just want to move well because they want to be healthy. In PE, depending on what age group you work with, the children may not realize that they want to move well. They might not consciously consider that. But remember, we talked about the fact that the better they are, the better their perception of how good they are at moving, then the more likely they are to choose physical activity and therefore be healthy. All right, so we're going to come back to that model and that idea later next week, okay, because there's a specific model on that physical activity perceived competence that I want to go over with you. So every time we move, it occurs within a context. So if I'm teaching, I have to take the context into account, right? And the context is going to be the interaction of the environment that we're working in, the task that I'm giving them to do, what the individual's situation is strength-wise, or how they are feeling that particular day. And certain constraints are more influential at certain times in the lifespan. So if you work with a group who are going to be entering puberty, then that growth spurt that they are part of during puberty dramatically increases the motor skill behavior that you're going to see during that time until their brain readjusts to the new shape and the new size, right? And remember that we've said all the time that the constraints change across the lifespan, so you can see things occur at any time that this particular theory might help you work with, all right? So it doesn't matter if you are working with your grandparents, you still want to use constraints as a reasonable model to help you explain what's appropriate for me to do with them to help them learn something new, all right? Or manage something they're already doing because they're starting to struggle, right? So we know manipulating certain constraints in the environment and with the task in particular can be useful for influencing that movement, right? And on the day, as the teacher, you're in charge of what's happening with the environment and the task, all right? We want children or individuals that we're working with to achieve the intended skill, the intended movement pattern. So what can I do to try to encourage the brain to create that movement pattern? Often when we do this with children, then they're not even conscious of the fact that they're being manipulated, right? Our intent, they don't know that, right? When we're out on the playground, they're not aware that we've done something in particular in the way we set up a station because what I'm looking for on this particular day is this, right? So when we used the bells the other day, they don't know that that was my attempt to try to get more arm action, because when we play with the scarves, we see a lot of running, but we don't see a lot of arm work, right? So we can manipulate the people in our charge without necessarily them knowing they're being manipulated, which is good because they want to feel like they're in charge, not us. Okay? So I can structure my environment. So if I'm a PE teacher and I have my gym at school, that might seem like it's a reasonably static environment, but it doesn't have to be, right? The research shows us that background color makes a big difference to catching. So can I change the color of the wall in my gym so that I can improve catching for a particular population of children, right? Would they let me paint one wall? Or if they're not going to let me paint in the gym, can I tape up colored paper on the wall that day to create a different background so that catching is more effective? You've already seen out on the playground how the grass and the surface makes a big difference to what you see happen. So if the grass isn't mowed and it's really long and clumpy and wet, we see very different movement patterns to when it's short and dry, because people don't want to slip and trip over, right? With our 3-year-olds, they're not thinking about slipping and tripping over, but we still see slightly different. We see less air time when the grass is long, because it's tricky for them. It adds friction, right? I've got to be a little bit stronger to cope with it. The older I get, the more fear might come into it, right? I don't want to go down a hole or slip on wet grass. Weather's a tricky one. Obviously, I can't control the weather as a teacher, but if I know that we're going to run a mile at some point, can I work out my semester plan so that I run the mile at a point in the semester where there's the best chance that the weather's going to be decent, right? Do I run the mile in August when it's 105 and uncomfortable, right? Or if I'm in the south, it's 98 and 95% humidity. Why would I do that then when I can wait 6 weeks and run a mile in weather that's lovely for running a mile? Right? So I can't control the weather, but I can manipulate when I choose to do a particular assessment. Then I can design the task. So I'm also in control of designing the task so it's the most appropriate for the people I'm working with, right? I've got to be flexible as a teacher. I've got to have plan A, plan B, plan C, okay? Those of you that were out there yesterday on the playground, right, we had to be flexible because I had a great playground set up on Monday. I thought, the Monday gang, what do you think of the setup? I liked it Monday, it worked very well. I was very much looking forward to doing that again on Wednesday. Oh no, that's not what was going to happen on Wednesday, right? So I've got to be able to be flexible with the tasks that I've got to hand so that I can set up something that's appropriate. We don't cancel PE because the weather's bad. That's not acceptable. So, you know, we wouldn't do it in our classroom. If the overhead projector doesn't work, I don't get to say, oh, guess what? We don't have class today because I can't show the PowerPoint. It's not good teaching. I'd like to, trust me, but we don't get to do that, right? So I don't get to cancel PE because it's cold. What's the other options? So remember that we've got 3 subsections under task. We've got the goals and the rules. So when we discussed throwing, what's the goal of the throw? Am I throwing far? Am I throwing hard? Am I throwing for accuracy? Am I throwing for speed? What's the goal that I attach to the task? Because that goal changes the behavior I will see. Right? The emerging movement will be different depending upon which goal I set. Right? Equipment. Oh, no, let's go back to goal for a minute. What about the rules? Right? If I play a regular team game in a PE class, right? Remember, in a PE class, my range of ability and my range of skill development is going to be pretty wide. Regardless of how good a teacher you are, you're going to have people who are quite poor at their skills and people who are pretty good at their skills, particularly if you've got athletes in your PE class. So if I do a game of basketball, who's going to get to play with the ball in a PE class?
The kids that are good.
The kids that are good, right? Well, that's nice for them, but it means the other kids are running up and down the court and they never get to touch the ball. Well, how do they get better at playing with the ball? Yes, sir.
Could you implement a rule, everybody touch the ball, everybody has to touch the ball before you score?
Definitely. Yeah. You can do whatever you want. You're the teacher, right? That's a great one. Right? You as a team, everybody on the team has to touch the ball before you're allowed to take a shot at goal. That would be a good rule. I can cut the number of people down on the team. Right? So if there's meant to be 7, I can say we're only going to have 3 or 4. That would mean that everybody got more opportunity to touch the ball and practice their ball skills. So you can change the goal, you can change the rules, you can change the equipment. Right? That's the easiest one, I think. It's simple to go, oh, that ball was too heavy, let's give them a lighter ball. If I'm willing to be flexible. If I'm not willing to be flexible and I'm going to make them do it with that ball because that's the one I put out today, then we've got a problem. I can body scale the equipment. So if I'm working with smaller children or I'm working with a population who aren't as strong, can I provide equipment that is smaller or lighter? All right, so keep remembering all the opportunities you've got to change what's happening in your gym. Now, so if I take all of that information, if I take those ideas, then what the book suggests to you is what they call an ecological task analysis. And I'm not a trained PE teacher, so this idea had not ever occurred to me until I started using this textbook 10 years ago. But it's a really cool idea because you get to take the constraints model and develop a task analysis that's very appropriate to use with individuals. All right, so in this copy of the book, you're looking at page 377 and 372. All right, and the top, sorry?
What were the pages?
371, 372. So, if I'm the PE teacher, then Dr. Berkey will teach you that you have to plan ahead what you're going to do in your classroom, right? You don't just get to turn up Monday morning and make up your lesson for the day. You have to have a plan ahead of time about what you're going to do. So you know what skills you're going to be aiming to teach and what you're concentrating on and what you're trying to develop, okay? So for this task analysis then, they say the process starts with picking the skill, right? That's obvious. So I'm going to pick the skill. So we're going to do kicking. Right? So kicking is my skill. And having picked the skill, then step 2 is, all right, if I understand constraints theory, what are the individual constraints that might most impact kicking? Okay? So there could be lots and lots and lots of individual constraints. But what are a couple that would be most crucial for kicking? So when I kick, what do I have to be able to do? Okay, so balance would be a really good individual constraint to think about, right? What else do I have to do? If I'm running and then I'm stepping and I'm kicking, I've got to have strength. Right? What about coordination? Coordination's really important in kicking because I've got both sides of my body doing different things. I have to have eye-foot coordination as well as limb coordination. Right? So coordination might be my third choice. So now I've got my individual constraints that I think are the most crucial to be working with. Then the idea is that I can pick task and environment constraints to manipulate that would affect some. Like if I've got someone with poor balance, how do I manipulate the task or the environment so that they can be more successful at the skill? So So what task could I do? What could I change about the ball or the movement of the ball, right, that might help someone who has poor coordination and or poor balance, right? What's an easy way to kick a ball? What do I want the ball to be doing?
Stationary.
Stationary, right? So a task constraint then could be movement of the ball. Right? And what we're aiming for is to create a grid that runs from easy to difficult. Okay? So, easy is stationary. Right? The easiest version of kicking a ball is if the ball is not moving. Okay? And if I look at the other end of my continuum, then a difficult version of ball movement would be the ball's moving really fast or really hard, or it's coming on an angle. That would be direction. Let's stick with fast, right? So the ball's moving really fast or hard. And then I get to pick however many steps I want on my continuum between stationary and moving really fast or hard.
So would that be like a gradient approach? Is that what you're talking about? Because if you're talking about
We're talking about movement of the ball, not the person at the moment. That would be another thing you could manipulate. Is my individual standing still? Am I asking them to walk up to the ball? Am I asking them to run and kick the ball? So you could manipulate that as a separate constraint. So you might end up with 3 or 4 different levels of difficulty for that constraint. That makes sense? Right? So movement of the ball would help with balance and it might help with coordination. What could I do that might help with strength that would be another task constraint I could change? Right? If someone's not very strong and I'm asking them to kick,
Like how heavy the ball is or the size of the ball?
or you could do heavy, you could do size or weight of the ball. That would be a good one. What about how far, the distance that I'm asking them to kick? So if I'm going to say they've got to kick at a goal, or they've got to kick to their partner, do I put them on opposite sides of the gym when I know one of them is not got very strong legs? Right? What are the chances that they're going to be able to kick the ball from all the way over here to their partner that's all the way over there? Right? But I agree, weight of the ball would be a good one as well. You can pick as many of these as you want, right? So let's try distance. So here my distance is going to be short, right? Close to, I'm going to have them stand close to the target, or I'm going to have them stand close to their partner. And here there's going to be a large distance between the person kicking and what they're aiming at. get to create levels of challenge from here to here. What about an environmental constraint that I could work with for kicking? Could affect balance and strength.
You're talking about whether you're inside or outside.
Okay, and what about whether you're inside or outside? What's the difference? The surface, right? So the surface is a great one because I can choose whether to be inside or outside. Right? I'm the teacher. Where am I doing the kicking? Now, surface is also interesting because different people are going to have different points of view of what is easy and what is hard. Right? Because as an older person, I'm going to say, I would rather kick, if you want me to run fast and kick that ball as hard as possible, I would prefer to be in the sand or on the grass, because if I do that in the gym, I might slip and fall, right? But if what I'm looking for is the ball's going to go, like the kicking feels successful for a child, then when they kick on a gym floor, on a shiny surface, the ball's going to travel better than it will out on the grass or the sand. So they might feel more successful kicking on a shiny floor than on sand, right? So surface can, I think, flip backwards and forwards depending upon what are you aiming for and who are you working with. So let's say it's not adults, right, and that you're working with kids in a PE class. Probably then your gym floor is the easiest option, right? Nice and smooth, the ball's gonna either stay still, or if it's moving, it's gonna be moving without lumps and bumps and changing direction before they're trying to kick it, right? So the judgment of the movement trajectory will be relatively simple, okay? And our most difficult would be, I don't know, soccer players. What's the most difficult surface for you to play on? Sand? Sand, gravel.
Well, tall grass.
Tall grass, right? So you could have tall grass before sand and gravel, or you could have sand and gravel before tall grass, right? Depending upon what you decide. And remember that nothing we do as a teacher is set in stone, right? You always, always, always watch what happens and change the lesson plan for the next time you use it. Always. It's just part of teaching. Just because I thought that tall grass was going to be easier than sand, then when I actually try it, sand is clearly more simple when I watch what happens with the children. And so the next time I create my grid, I have to flip them around. Right? That's good teaching practice. Use what happens to effect what you choose to do the next time. So I'm going to come up with my continuum, again, easy to difficult. Right? So I've got this practical range of things I can manipulate to be more appropriate for where we are in the lesson plan in the semester, or who I'm working with. Okay. Now then, there's a couple of different ways I can use this task analysis. I've created the grid, I've done the work, now I get to use it in a couple of different ways, because I can use it to help me structure my lesson plan. So at the beginning of the semester, maybe I decide that I've got a brand new class of kids that I've never seen. So perhaps I'm an elementary PE teacher and I'm working with my first graders. They've just come in from kindergarten and I don't teach PE at kindergarten. So I've got no idea what they can do. So day one, my lesson plan, I'm going to set up that. And maybe my level of challenge is going to be in different sizes and weights of balls. I'm just going to chuck out lots of different balls. But basically what I'm aiming for in the gym is that. And I watch the lesson and I take notes and I see what's going on. You know, that probably was too simple for some of the people in the class. So the next time we're going to play kicking in PE, I'm going to add an option where I've got some movement. I'm going to keep the distance pretty short because they're first graders, they're not very big, they're not very strong, and I want them to feel successful. So the second time we try it, I'm going to keep the distance short and we're going to stay in the gym. And so on and so on. Maybe the next lesson, lesson number 3, we add in a trickier distance. And perhaps we decide the weather's nice, we're going to go outside and try playing on the playground because we have a concrete surface. I don't have to deal with grass or sand. So you can use the task analysis to help you create a developmental set of lesson plans where things change across time. The other way you can use it is to assess your children. So, traditionally, in PE, unfortunately, we've not done a very good job of having developmentally appropriate assessment, right? We tend to have a picture in our head of what we think is correct, and we judge the individual against that picture. And they did it right or they did it wrong, right? Which, even if you're working with highly skilled competitive people, has some dubious aspects to it. But if I'm working with a PE class, then I shouldn't be expecting them to match this picture in my head, right? And grading them based on whether or not they match the picture. So I can use the task analysis to give me a better way of assessing them. So let's say that on day 1, I'm going to assess the kids, and little Annie comes in and she can barely kick the ball even when it's stationary, right? She still misses the ball or kind of barely kicks the ball. And it clearly doesn't go very far. And we're in our gym, so we're on our smooth surface. Okay. Then we do this unit of kicking, and the next time I assess Annie, what I find is that now she can kick a ball that's moving not really hard, but quite fast. It's not.